Hello, this is Pastor Christopher Morendi of the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture, and I'm very glad to be with you today to bring you the second part of our webinar with Vance McCoy. Vance McCoy runs Triple Creek Cover Crops in LC, Nebraska, southwest Nebraska. And we'd certainly encourage you to watch the first part of our conversation where we kind of discuss a little bit kind of bigger picture things about stewardship of the land and rural community and that sort of thing. And here we're going to dive in a little deeper on his specialty, which is cover crops, and start talking about what kind of benefits that cover cropping has, both for the bigger operation and then also for even very small operations. And I might have some questions, very specific questions, because we're considering a few different cover crops and using them in different ways on the work that we're doing here. So Vance, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Vance, tell us, I guess in general terms, give us the definition of a cover crop. What is a cover crop and why are they so important?
Yeah, so I guess for me, the definition is just that it keeps the ground covered. Most of them are, going to get terminated before harvest. But I think, in the first video I mentioned, my dad, we planted cover crops before we knew what cover crops were, just because we had very sandy ground and it would blow if you didn't. And so anytime, if you weren't raising a cash crop, you had to put something out there to keep the ground covered. And so that's just it, just keeping that blanket on the ground to protect it from erosion, from heavy rain events, just those kind of things.
So it has that benefit of covering the ground, and I think I can't remember which of my last couple interviews just said God God doesn't like naked soil. I mean, if you don't put something in it, there's going to be that other things that you might not want so much are going to come up as well. So there's also a kind of a weed suppression benefit to cover crops as well, right?
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah, um, it's amazed me over time. Some of the, our old practice here was to not old, but in the last 20 years, we would harvest our wheat and then spray it almost immediately, and then end up spraying it maybe 2 or 3 times before the next year we would plant corn into that. And one of the first experiences I had, well, we'll just try it, and we slipped in a cover crop mix after wheat harvest, and I was just amazed there weren't any weeds in that. Just it was just amazing to me that taking something we had been spraying 3, maybe 4 passes between wheat harvest and the next corn crop, and getting it down to 1 or 2. So yeah, it really helps hold out the weeds.
Yeah. Does um does it also have nutritional benefits for the soil? Does it also provide I got yeah, how does it benefit the soil itself, having these different, and of course every cover crop's going to help differently. How does it improve the quality of the soil itself?
Well, the number one is keeping it covered. Anytime you get a rain event, it just when you see that, I've seen slow motion video of a raindrop hitting a leaf, say, and it explodes it, and it just turns it into a mist, versus just a raindrop hitting the ground, and that rain, it'll make an impact and it'll actually splash dirt. And then the other thing is the roots. That those plants are converting sunlight to sugar, and the sugar is feeding the microbes in the soil. So, feeding your underground livestock, what livestock do, we take feedlot manure and spread it back on the fields because we know what it'll do for us. And, the underground livestock are doing that same thing. They're taking that, the stuff that comes, the root exudates, they call it, and growing, and they're pooping that out, and they're making fertilizer. And then also the above ground biomass, I've seen some numbers on like rye and how much, and then that's one of the issues that people have with cover, how much nitrogen they use, but they're not using it. They're storing it in that biomass, and then the biology breaks that down again. So it's a whole cycle of, and then you take some of the legumes, and they're actually hosting the bacteria that are fixing nitrogen out of the air. So all of those things, and that's if you get a mixture that has some legumes in it, it'll make some nitrogen for you. But it does store it in the biomass and tie it up. So, and that's the good and the bad of it. So
And so the biomass then you can let just lay, right, and kind of decompose and then plant into that, or do you want to get remove that off and use it for some other application?
the best is to leave it there. If you're The best is to have some livestock recycle it for you,
Mhm.
um, to a degree, not overgrazing it, but getting it more manageable, getting it back into a form that's more usable to your next crop. So to me, that preferably have remove it some livestock. Now haying it, if you pull it off as hay, I know people do that, but I've regretted it. So um, just and I've tried it and I forget. And every time I kick myself, why did you hay that instead of just either letting it go or graze it?
Yeah. What before we get into specific kinds of cover crops, just give us pick out a field, and maybe it's a hypothetical field, maybe it's one of your, a field that maybe it's the one behind you. Um, but it kind of take us through the cycle. What does cover cropping look like in practice for a typical field over the course of a year or so?
So around here we have two different kind of environments. We have irrigated fields, which the one behind me is, and then we have non-irrigated fields, and they're kind of two completely separate animals. And so I'll mostly focus on irrigated because that's where it really works the best. Um, Dry land, it's a little hit and miss out here because we just don't get enough. Um, and you know, and that's really people really hesitant to do cover crops on dry land here, and I look at it more as a diverse rotation on dry land as with cover crops as part of the mix. But anyway, so I'll focus on an irrigated field. So an irrigated field will take um, used to be we planted corn, corn, corn. I had fields that were planted to corn continuously for probably years from the time they got pivots put in to recently. And then we started, some of what I talked about in the first video out of necessity. I needed to be able to break up my workload and I was trying to convert to no-till, and it's really hard to no-till corn on corn. We just have the residue just doesn't rise here very good. We don't have winter moisture so it's a lot of residue. So we started putting in soybeans, and I could no-till soybeans into corn fairly easily, and I could go back to corn extremely easily. So as a no-till, like not a rotation, but a oscillation. And so we started slipping in rye behind the soybeans to give us time to get that growing in the fall and get a good cover on the ground. And sometimes I graze that, sometimes not. So this field I want to tell you about. So it had soybeans on it. For this, only the second, there was a field that had been corn on corn for 30 years. And then about the second time last year, we had soybeans in it. So I went in there right after soybean harvest, or as close as we could, and planted rye. But I'm skipping a row of rye so that I have a place to no-till my corn into this spring. And that's one of the things that I've kind of learned over time is one by accident, we had a drill row plugged, and it just so happened our corn looked so much better in that plugged drill row. So I plugged them all, plugged every third row on the drill. So we have that. And so that's one of the things I've tried to develop. I built a row crop roller to roll that down to terminate it, but I've not had success with that. So We're still tweaking with that, but so basically I'll terminate that. If it's non-GMO, this field I'm telling you about will be non-GMO corn this year, so I'll have to terminate that rye. I'll terminate it chemically before the corn comes up. And so I kind of only get one shot at it, and I'll take that shot. So, but I'm trying to let it grow as long as possible. One of the things that really scare people about rye going into corn is that it ties up a lot of nitrogen. And I found that there's kind of an awkward stage to rye where if you terminate it too early, you don't get any benefit. If you terminate it somewhere in that middle point, that's when it's really tying up. But I found out if you can wait till the rye heads out, it's actually the best for me. So just a learning process. We've had some disasters of trying to roll it down to terminate without having a GMO Roundup Ready corn for a backup. So then that particular field will be corn this year, and then we will go in no matter how late, and we'll plant rye again. And then next year, when we plant the beans, I will wait till the beans are going pretty good, and those will be a GMO bean with Roundup Ready. So that, and I'll wait till the beans are up pretty good before I'll terminate that rye on there. So mostly for weed control and also for having some residue later.
How would you respond to someone who I was just thinking, trying to play devil's advocate and think through this here? So someone who said, well, that sounds like a lot of work to plant a whole crop that you're not even going to take to market, that you're growing to then just roll over or spray or whatever. You're going to terminate it one way or another, and then plant the next crop in it. What I mean, maybe there's a financial argument. I don't know if you've pushed the numbers enough to give us those kind of numbers, but at the very least, what would be your response to that?
Um, I guess it is a lot of work, but some of that is it's flexible work. I mean, it doesn't have to be done today. A lot of times it can be, and then just oh, sorry there. It can be spraying has to be done like now. And so it kind of gives you some flexibility on the spraying if you're not out there having to spray multiple passes with the sprayer. So it's a trade-off, I guess I would say, on workload, but it's there again, I won't send my wife out to spray a field. I just won't do it. But I'll have her. She'll drill for me all the time. So it's to me, it's cleaner work and safer than the chemicals, and it really does allow us to cut back on chemicals and fertilizers.
Let's talk about the specific plants themselves. What kind, you mentioned rye, you've mentioned buckwheat or in our previous conversation. Just throw out there some of your favorite ones and tell us what the benefit is of each plant.
Okay, so switching to because like the irrigated, you're raising a cash crop every year, and your window's a little tight. So I gave you the irrigated scenario, but on a dryland scenario, say I want to slip something in behind wheat stubble. So I like a mix, and I like oats. Oats about any time of year. They're one of my favorite. They're number one mycorrhizal host for mycorrhizal fungi. They really associate well, and they'll, if they're just for cover, they'll grow anytime here. And so I really like oats base for that. I like any of the brassicas. When I was first getting into this, radishes get all the press. That's probably my least favorite brassica. Something that I really like out here is forage collards. They'll do pretty much the same thing for you, but that when you look at the root structure on those, they're pretty similar to pigweed, which is the weed we have growing. If you don't raise something out here, you're gonna have pigweed. Even if you do raise something out here, you're gonna have pigweed. And so the root structure is pretty similar. So I feel like it's doing the same thing for your soil. And so that's one of my favorites in the brassica column. Legumes in the summer, I really like. Um, I'm drawing a blank. Cowpeas, because they're a legume and they're going to make nitrogen for you. And we found out last year they are super drought tolerant. Like they're the only thing that grew, and that amazed me. And so I like those in the mix. Also, I've used popcorn. If it's in a grazing scenario, it's pretty cheap to put in. The cows love it. You know, one of the first years I did it, after the freeze, we turned some cattle in there and we had oats and popcorn, and they just loved it. The cows just went nuts on that stuff. And so, yeah, I've got lots of favorites when it comes to cover crop. I like them all. Buckwheat is a scavenger. Buckwheat behind me, that's a scavenger of phosphate. So it's a good one to, if you're trying to cut your phosphate levels, to put in the mix to make some more of that available for you.
You've talked a bit about grazing into cover crops, so get a, and you mentioned a little bit in the first video as well about animals. How could now I'm not you it doesn't sound like you necessarily do this on every field, but how can animal impact be integrated into this cover crop system? How does that all work together with them bringing the cattle in or other animals into that process?
Well, yeah, done right, it can really help. It really helps to break down. It helps with the nutrient cycling process, and it's a challenge out here because a lot of our non-irrigated fields were um, they're far from any water source, and so those are challenged. But any place we have a water source, so the old way of doing it was they they'd raise wheat and then they'd summer fallow it and then they'd raise wheat and then they'd summer fallow it, and then we came along and started integrating more no-till in that. We'd have wheat and then we'd plant corn and then we'd summer fallow it. But then as time's gone on, it's been a lot more um, just continuous crop. But still, there's a lot of years you have a fallow year. So in that fallow year, I really like to, if I have a water source, I like to go in that fallow year. So you're following corn, you've got some little bit of corn residue out there, and maybe some volunteer, some ear corn that's laying on the ground. Go in there and plant a cover crop mix, and then graze that light, and then take half, leave half kind of deal, and then let the rest go. And then that fall, if there's enough moisture, to plant wheat again. So in our fallow year, we're using it a lot. That the cattle just kind of provide the income to pay for the cover crop seed, and basically end up getting their fallow year for free versus spending $80 an acre on chemical chemthal on it. So it's not a huge money maker, but it definitely helps the rotation. But then like I said, it just really helps. The cattle really helped with the nutrient cycling.
Yeah, and I know Gabe Brown actively plants cover crops specifically for his cattle to go over. That's the if I'm remembering correctly from his book. Yeah, animal impact is really fascinating to me, how this can be integrated and worked into the entire system as we think through this. So cover crops we've talked quite a bit about cover crops for more for bigger row crop operations, that sort of thing. What do you see the place of cover crops? Why should the quote unquote homesteader or small hobby farmer or whatever, why should they be interested in cover crops?
Because it's a lot less work. If if you if you put a cover crop on your garden and then roll that down, it's easy. You can terminate it that way if you're doing it by hand. and then you're planting into that old residue, and it just helps hold the weeds out. And same deal. You're cycling some nutrients there. You're maybe making some, depending on what you use for a mix. And in a garden scenario, it's like if it fails, you know, I may not have as many tomatoes that year. It's not financially devastating. So I think it's a great place to start. Try cover crops in your garden. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've done just a little bit. We did some buckwheat a couple of years ago, on a garden plot, and I'm trying to remember what else we've used. We're talking about doing buckwheat to then run chickens over this year. And I'm told that the chickens just absolutely love the stuff, and then process it down so that way you can do something else with that plot of land. You could garden with it or whatever in the next year.
Yeah. One of the things I like to tinker in the garden. I used to hate gardening. My was trying to get the rototiller running while I'm trying to plant corn, kind of stuff. And since we've started no-tilling on our garden and cover crops, I've gained a lot more interest in it, mostly because it's just a time savings thing. And just I just hate a rototiller.
Well, and it seems like it's something, again, you find the right mix, or you find the right one, or I mean you experiment to find the right one. Um, and then yeah, you don't have to till up. You have that plants that are designed that are there to be simply laid down on the ground, and break down, and keep that living root in the soil, which is what we want to be doing out in our fields too, in our pastures. And really, again, it seems strange to plant a crop that you're not going to harvest. That I think is maybe a mental barrier to get over. But you see the other benefits. That's why you're planting it, is because it's going to give you other benefits other than simply, oh, now I've got something to put in my freezer, or to can or whatever.
One of the things I learned about cover crops, though, is a lot of them are really good to eat.
Yeah.
Uh, I posted last summer a purple top turnip sandwich, and I got a lot. But peas, I'll pick peas, forage peas. I'll pick those and eat. So there are a lot of things that double up that are a good cover crop. They're also good to eat. Okra, just a lot of the things we are raising as cover crops are just a really good food. So it's just kind of interesting how they double.
Yeah, and buckwheat, I think you can harvest if you want, as well. It's not, and buckwheat, I believe, and you would know better than I do. It's not, it's like a pseudo wheat, right? It's not exactly like a wheat or oats or something like that, right? It's a little bit different.
Right? It's the grain is a gluten-free grain, and you can grind it. You grind it into flour. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that wheat flour by looking at it. I mean, and yeah, a lot of free, a lot of the stuff that's going for grain is going for gluten-free flour. I've never had it. My mom says it's really good. I need to try it probably, but I've had I've buckwheat flour, I guess,
Yeah, I've seen buckwheat flour in the
which
stores before. So yeah.
yeah, it seems kind of crazy that I wouldn't, but just part of that health deal. This field behind me, I sprayed it with gramoxone to desiccate it to harvest it. I don't need that, so that's where a lot of that human health side of things. We're still on the journey trying to get things figured out.
Yeah. Well, one last topic I wanted to talk to you about, and I hinted at it at the end of our first interview. you're having the opportunity. You didn't end up going this spring, but you're looking to perhaps in the future to do some traveling out to Africa, to Uganda, in connection with your church, and teach some of these techniques to folks in Africa. Now you haven't been out there yet, so you can't essentially give us a trip report, but describe a little bit, talk a little bit about that opportunity and what you're hoping comes of it.
Yeah, so I'm planning to go next winter, probably February. So our church has it started as an orphanage that we started just to take care of kids, that just to feed the kids, and but the mission, feed it, but tell them about the love of God, and the ultimate goal is their salvation. But to do that, you kind of got to take care of them physically. So we started as an orphanage, and then it branched school. And as these kids grow up, some of them are doing or technical and coming back, and some of that is just teaching them how to feed themselves. And and part of that is the land where they're at is completely depleted. It's not well taken care of. I mean, they've got 60 inches of rain, but they talk about the need for irrigation and this and that. Just blows me away. It's just soil is just so they just don't know how to to build their soil back, or even raise a crop to start with. So this is I do a lot of teaching here, and I just like that over there also, and just and some of it's selfish. See what a guy could do with something like that. They say that the soil is just like it's just it's almost like the red volcanic rock that you buy for landscaping. That's kind of what their subsoil, and then the top is just kind of crushed. It's like red dirt, and so it's yeah, it's exciting to me to take somebody who hasn't had 40 or 50 years of being taught how to use farm like we do here, and or some of the things I'm learning.
Well, and it'll be fascinating to see, how some of these techniques can translate with that kind of soil, and how it can be built. You and I, from places where the black earth, I mean, you said you've got a little bit more sand in your soil, of course, in western Nebraska, but the rich soil that we're used to, the rich soil that you're seeking to build on your farm is, yeah, not just a dream for them. It'd be really interesting to see if you can help them start rebuilding, and I'm sure it's something that's going to take a generation to really rebuild. It'll be interesting to see just in the first few years how what kind of benefits can come. So that's amazing. That's wonderful.
One of the limiting factors we have here, though, for building soil is our lack of rain.
Yeah.
And so even some of the fastest results I've rendered irrigation where we can push it a little. And so I've seen results in a few short years. And it's kind of exciting for me to be able to see what you could do with 40 or 60 inches of rain.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, you really, you're really pushing your soil. You could turn it around in a hurry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that'd be really cool. We'll have to kind of check after you go down there, and in the years to come, we'll have to see what kind of we kind of hear your report on how things go down there, and how things move forward in the years to come. Well, Vance, it's been wonderful to be with
Yeah.
you, to have you with us today. We've been speaking and chatting with Vance McCoy of Triple Creek Cover Crops in Elsie, Nebraska. And it's been such a joy to have you with us, Vance. You've been a wonderful encouragement and support of what we're doing out here in Southwest Iowa, and a good friend. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person in Seward over in June. So the Lord be with you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you.
All right, friends, God's blessings. I am Pastor Christopher Murundi, the director of Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture. Keep sharing these videos, liking them, passing them along. It's been such a blessing to have so many expert voices come on and share their experiences, share kind of their thinking through being Christians and stewards of the land. And I've been learning so much and getting different angles and different perspectives from everyone we've been going through. So continue to share these videos, pass them along, and encourage others to learn from these folks that we've been having on with us. So Lord be with you. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and check out this video. Check out the video that we did before if you haven't yet, and keep watching for more webinars to come. And you'll be getting this. Will be posting on Holy Week. So a blessed Holy Week to you all, and a very blessed Easter and Easter tide to you. God's blessings. Bye.